You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday, the 25th of March. Galloway's computer seized amidst hacking complaint. The crime that need not have happened. Scottish church that let Muslims in to pray, hit by Satan abuse on Facebook. High Court upholds ban on Christian groups' gay cure ads. Boris Johnson, I'd love to be Prime Minister if the public called me to serve. Cyprus, a wild and wicked roller coaster. Silent Conquest, a tale of Sharia and Western self-censorship. The media imperialists. Syrian jihadist chemical weapons. The Saudis oppress their people and expect visitors to look the other way. Thought for the day, halal, UKIP and more. And finally, I give up. To flapjack or not to flapjack? UK news. Galloway's computer seized amidst hacking complaint. Police have seized a Commons computer belonging to MP George Galloway as part of a probe into claims the Maverick sanctioned the hacking of a former secretary's private emails. Scotland Yard said it was examining the laptop after a complaint that the Respect MP had authorised a lawyer to spy on the Hotmail account of Aisha Ali Khan, suspended by Mr Galloway last October. The Bradford West MP, who denies he condoned hacking, put down a Commons motion last year accusing Ms Ali Khan of a dirty tricks campaign against him with her husband Afiz Khan, a member of the Metropolitan Police Anti-Terror Squad. Mr Galloway's claims led to the arrest of the couple on suspicion of data protection offences and, in Mr Khan's case, of abusing his position as a police officer. But now Scotland Yard is also investigating how Mr Galloway first became aware of the emails. The killer of the Birmingham schoolgirl Christine Edkins, 16, who was buried on the 22nd and who was murdered in an apparently random attack that lasted just 1 or 2 seconds, has been revealed and of course downplayed by the police and media. Detective Superintendent Richard Baker said the incident had been captured on CCTV, including the attack itself and the moment the suspect, named locally as Philippe Similani, got off the bus wearing a distinctive jacket with a large tiger motif. He said Miss Edkins had boarded the number 9 bus on Broad Street at about 7:30 a.m, as she did every morning. She took a seat upstairs where the suspect was already waiting. The 22-year-old man managed to get off the bus without attracting attention before spending several hours travelling around Birmingham and the West Midlands on various buses. He then returned to the scene of the crime, where he was apprehended after a brief chase. He has been sectioned under the Mental Health Act. Miss Edkins had previously expressed fears on Twitter about a man who was behaving oddly on the bus, but Detective Superintendent Baker said there was nothing to suggest she had been targeted. World at 8 comments. This will be played down because the perpetrator is obviously a person of colour and this was a young white victim. The killer is either a black schizophrenic or the result of when Asians' first cousins marry. It needs to be said that without our open door policy on immigration for 40 years, this particular crime would not have occurred. Scottish church that let Muslims in to pray hit by Satan abuse on Facebook. A priest who has allowed Muslims to pray in his church has told how he has been hit by a barrage of abuse by internet trolls. St John's Episcopal Church became the first church in the UK to share their building with Muslims after Reverend Isaac Pubalan saw members of a neighbouring mosque praying outside in the snow because of lack of space. Hundreds of Muslims now pray in the Aberdeen church's main hall and chapel every week, but the news has not been well received by some Christians who have taken to the church's Facebook page to blast the decision. One user said the church was sharing Christ's table with Satan before others predicted a flood of Muslims moving to Aberdeen to convert the church into a mosque, and the said Reverend Pubalan needed to be given the boot before it was too late. World at 8 says, as an apostate, Pubalan should just hand over the keys and convert. It is not a Christian act to turn your church over to a false religion. It is heresy. High Court upholds ban on Christian groups' gay cure ads. High Court Judge Beverley Lang upheld on Friday a decision to ban a Christian group from placing adverts on London buses that suggested people could be cured of homosexuality. The group, Court Issues Trust, wanted to place adverts on the side of London's distinctive red double-decker buses that read, "Not gay, ex-gay, post-gay and proud, get over it." The proposed adverts were a response to a campaign by gay rights group Stonewall, which had run adverts on London buses that read, "Some people are gay, get over it." The ban was supported by Transport for London and London Mayor Boris Johnson. Talking about Boris Johnson, I'd love to be Prime Minister if the public called me to serve. Boris Johnson has declared he wouldn't say no to being Prime Minister if he were urged to help rescue the country like the Roman leader Cincinnatus. The Mayor of London gave yet another strong sign that he has leadership ambitions, telling school children that he would be happy to run the country if called upon in a crisis. He compared himself to the Cincinnatus who was asked to lead Rome after an invasion, even though he was living simply as a farmer at the time. World at 8. Dream on, Boris. Cincinnatus did not wish the role. It was a role offered out of respect, something an overprivileged buffoon will never have. European news. Cyprus, a wild and wicked roller coaster. Earlier today a deal was announced to save Cyprus and possibly the EU. The main point is that whilst deposits of €100,000 and under are fully protected, deposits of over €100,000 could be at risk. Russian President Putin has said that Russia will restructure the €2.5 billion loan made in 2011 in an effort to aid the island state in overcoming its economic and banking crisis. The deal would scrap the highly controversial idea of a tax on bank deposits, although it would still require forced losses for depositors and bondholders. Silent Conquest, a tale of Sharia and Western self-censorship. At yesterday's debut showing of Silent Conquest, the end of freedom of expression in the West, at the Heritage Foundation, one of the most shocking moments was a comment by Lars Hedegaard, a Danish historian and chairman of the Danish Free Press Society. Hedegaard was asked, could the screening of this movie and the free intellectual discussion of the advance of Islamic Sharia law in the West have taken place at a European, say, British think tank? "No, I don't think so," was his chilling answer. The subjects of Islam and Sharia have simply become taboo in many European countries. Free speech advocates, amongst them moderate Muslim voices, are deeply concerned. As shown in Silent Conquest throughout Europe, in Canada and even in the United States, judicial systems in countries with large Muslim minorities are under pressure to adopt Sharia free speech restrictions. As a result, in many places, including Denmark, it is now a crime to say anything negative about Islam or the Prophet Muhammad, regardless of whether such statements are factual or not. The concept that even offensive speech is protected, so fundamental to the US's Constitution's First Amendment, is collapsing. World at 8. Part of the answer may be found in the following news item: media imperialists. World news. Media imperialists. Samuel Westrop, writing for the Gatestone Institute, says, if there is Western imperialism at all, defined by many in the media as the harmful effects of Western hegemony, it can be found in The Guardian and the New York Times, as their journalists impose their brand of moderation onto the people of the East. When the New York Times finally decided in January to report the anti-Semitic comments made by Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood President Mohamed Morsi, almost 2 weeks after the Middle East Media Research Institute broke the story, the report prompted further coverage in newspapers across the world, and even forced a statement from the White House in condemnation of the remarks. But why did it take so long? While hundreds of articles have labelled, say, the Israeli politician Naftali Bennett an extremist, why does the media try to avoid criticising actual despots and extremists in other countries? In a number of interviews uncovered by Memory in January, President Morsi condemned Zionists and Jews by describing them as bloodsuckers who attack the Palestinians, these warmongers, the descendants of apes and pigs. Morsi called for military resistance in Palestine against these Zionist criminals assaulting the land of Palestine and the Palestinians. Another video, also unearthed by Memory, showed Morsi addressing a crowd in the Nile Delta urging Egyptians to nurse our children and our grandchildren on hatred for them, for Zionists, for Jews. In June 2012, major media outlets completely ignored a video posted online which showed Morsi chanting, "Jihad is our path and death for the sake of Allah is our most lofty aspiration." World at 8. For some diabolical reason of their own, the so-called Western elite want to see the advance of Islam and the destruction of the very fabric of Western civilization. Syrian jihadists' chemical weapons. The military's version of events is that the homemade rocket was fired at a military checkpoint situated at the entrance to the town. The immediate effects were to induce vomiting, fainting, suffocation and seizures amongst those in the immediate area. A second source, a medic at the local civilian hospital, said that he personally witnessed members of the Syrian army helping those wounded and dealing with fatalities at the scene. That Syrian soldiers were amongst the reported 26 deaths has not been disputed by either side. The military source who spoke to Channel 4 News confirmed that artillery reports from the Syrian army suggest a small rocket was fired from the vicinity of Al-Bab, a district close to Aleppo that is controlled by Jabhat al-Nusra, a jihadist group said to be linked with Al-Qaeda and deemed a terrorist organisation by the US. In further reporting, Alex Thompson, chief correspondent, Channel 4 News, has said in The Telegraph, whatever happened last week in the town of Qas al-Assal, west of Aleppo, it achieved something extraordinary in the Syrian civil war, unity amongst Washington, Moscow and Damascus. All welcomed the rapid decision by Ban Ki-moon, the United Nations Secretary General, to investigate an alleged chemical attack that reportedly killed 26, including Syrian soldiers. Unusually, the request for that investigation came from the Syrian regime, which claimed the Islamic jihadist rebels launched a chemical weapons attack. Since then, precious little evidence in any way has come from the area, despite an awful lot of diplomatic noises around the world. At the same time, the Washington Post reports, the suspicious attack that killed 26 people in northern Syria last week exposed the difficulty of determining whether the Syrian regime has resorted to using chemical weapons, as well as the lingering uncertainty over how President Obama would respond if what he has called a red line is crossed. There is a distinct lack of intelligence as to what really happened, with both the Syrian government and rebels accusing each other of unleashing chemical weapons. The course Obama intends to take if confronted with proof of a chemical attack is equally unclear. An Obama administration official involved in preparations for securing Syria's chemical weapons has said, "If we had to go in tomorrow, I'd say we aren't ready." The level of uncertainty surrounding US contingency planning 2 years into a conflict that has killed more than 70,000 people contrasts with the clarity of Obama's repeated admonitions to the government of President Bashir al-Assad. After initial reports indicated that chemical weapons might have been used in the attack near Aleppo last week, Obama said such a step by Assad would be a game changer. He said he had instructed his teams to find out precisely whether or not this red line was crossed. Republican Mike Rogers, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, mocked Obama in a series of appearances last week. In a PBS interview, he said that the US threshold for action can't be a pink line, it can't be a dotted line, it can't be an imaginary line. Meanwhile, Russia Today quotes an anonymous US official as saying, "Our growing sense is that weaponized chemical weapons were not used." A stance RT claims a European security official has taken, saying that the death toll in the event of a chemical attack would have been much higher than presently recorded. He added that there was no evidence to support the allegation despite prior accusations by a multitude of Western officials. World Date. Amazing that if true, the jihadists will get away with using some sort of chemical weapon against their own, but Assad cannot. It would appear that the USA are continuing their preparations for direct intervention in Syria, and Britain will once again tag along for the ride. The Saudis oppress their people and expect visitors to look the other way. Prince Charles visited Saudi Arabia this past week, one of the several high-profile visitors to the kingdom in recent weeks, following separate trips by John Kerry and US Attorney General Eric Holder. Most repressive states usually try to behave when hosting Western dignitaries, but not the Saudis. Despite all these visits, the country executed 7 men by firing squad for a robbery committed while they were still juveniles. One had originally been sentenced to death by crucifixion, although King Abdullah intervened to bring his sentence in line with that of his peers. Saudi prince jailed in Britain for sexually abusing and murdering his male servant flies home to serve the rest of his life sentence. A Saudi prince jailed for life in Britain for murdering his servant has been flown back to the Middle Eastern country to serve the rest of his sentence, the British government said on Wednesday. Prince Saud bin Abdul Aziz bin Nasir, a grandson of Saudi Arabia's King Abdullah, was jailed in 2010 for killing Bandar Abdullah Abdul Aziz in a London hotel after subjecting him to a sadistic campaign of violence and sexual abuse. But Britain's Ministry of Justice confirmed that the 36-year-old royal flew back to Saudi Arabia on Monday after he was granted a transfer to the prison in his homeland. Word at 8 comments. We can send a Saudi prince back home to serve his sentence for murder in the UK, but we can't send Qatada back to Jordan for his crimes in Jordan. Money talks and, well, bullshit still stinks, and we aren't even in Denmark. It's just too bad the Saudi prince won't get the same justice in Saudi Arabia as the common thieves. He'll probably be held in the lap of Saudi luxury, justice. Thought for the day: the halal holocaust, UKIP and the sheeples. My thought for today came about because I received a very interesting series of emails between one of our well-known supporters of the party and our website and a representative of UKIP in the European Parliament on the subject of halal and sashida slaughter in the UK. I don't know which was more hypocritical, the responses from Michael Jose in the EU or the actual awfulness of halal even existing in a so-called civilised European country, and Skegness at that. It was clear that Michael Jose was at first unaware of our guys' affiliations, and in a classic email said that UKIP is non-sectarian. Now, when you picked yourself up off the floor over this lie, you have to listen to the questions that preceded that statement in the original reply to our John Kent. Jose asks if the Inquirer was the following: anti-Islamic, Sharia, Muslim culture, and wish them to relocate preferably out of the UK. Well, that's me found out. Anti-religious, militant secularist, and wish all religions to cease or exist or move away. Anti-halal slaughter methods on an animal cruelty basis. Merely wishing not to have any slaughterhouse located near you. Vegetarian and therefore opposed to all meat. Then the non-sectarian bit. If UKIP is non-sectarian, and we all know it isn't, why need these clarifications on a fairly straightforward subject, that of halal sashita slaughter? The sad result of this is that although John Kent expressed himself and his views more than adequately, the tone of what response there was, after much buck passing, was not forthright, honest, or any use at all. The UKIP attitude is very much that of the establishment. They will have no discourse at all on any subject concerning Islam or immigration if the person raising the point is a member of our party. I had the same attitude from Peter Hitchens of the Mail. It was just after I joined the British National Party, and Hitchens and I were conducting a fairly equable email discussion on unions, and of course, him being an ex-Trotskyite, his and my opinions differed, but it wasn't until I told him I'd joined the BNP that he lost the plot completely. In fact, after telling me all the old rumours of some of the top personnel of my party, he told me he would no longer have any contact with me unless I left the BNP. That is what we have been up against for many years, and this attitude doesn't dwindle with time. Unfortunately, it seems to build up momentum. The sad fact is that UKIP will never rock the Euro boat. They rely too heavily on the massive amounts of monies they get from that particular ship and any incumbent UK government. Rather like pirates, without the glamour or the guts, they will continue to wring their hands, rather like a character out of Dickens, and slide towards the next money box. As for rocking the boat of Islam, never. They see it as their future, both in Europe and the UK. If they do nothing to offend them, never question what they have brought into this country, and hide behind the non-sectarian stone, they think they will be safe at some point in the future. Now, on the subject of halal, Muslim and sashita Jewish slaughter, there is no middle ground. Our own governments have been promoting this sort of filth and perversion throughout our land for many years. even before the public really knew about it and what it entails. I find as an animal lover, but a meat eater, that the way modern farming and slaughter have gone is wrong. I find fault with the growing numbers of people who we have to feed in this country, the totally alien religious angle, the greed of the supermarkets for a buck, and the farmers forced by monetary deficits to promote factory farming, and the popular fact that bled meat lasts longer on the shelf, all of which contribute to a prevalence amongst the people who could monitor it or stop it to turn a blind eye. The basis is the animal is not stunned before having its throat cut. Stunning doesn't kill the animal, but it should render it unconscious so that it hopefully doesn't know when its throat is slit. In halal especially, the backbone is not cut, so the blood pumps out completely. This process can take minutes, and anyone knows that a moment of pain is a very long moment. I believe in the case of cows the poor beast is left standing and the sheep are hung up by their legs. All this takes place in a huge room with all animals present for the killing of their peers. In kosher killing, at least the poor animal is supposed to be alone, and kosher butchers are trained, but I still think the process outdated and thoroughly nasty. Outdated? Why, you'll ask? Well, these so-called dietary laws were brought in by the Jewish religion first of all, because that religion is the oldest religion in the Middle East, from whence sprang the Christian religion. Even Jesus viewed piggies as beyond the pale, as he induced madness into them. But you have to understand that in those days there were no refrigerators. It was very hot. These Hebrews lived in the desert, and pork most of all went off very quickly, as indeed did shellfish if they could get them. Also meat that was bled out stayed fresher longer, so there was some reason to kill animals that way. Also, of course, they didn't have the modern killing houses that we have now. One of the fathers of Islam, they claim was Abraham, was of course a Hebrew, so the halal laws in some way reflect that way of life that they shared thousands of years ago, that of a nomadic desert tribe. Not now. There is no reason on earth why animals should be killed in this barbaric way, and indeed at a BNP conference a few years ago it was written into the Constitution that we would as a party outlaw unstunned killings when we get into power. The creeping evil of this is now just beginning to put its tentacles into the roots of British life. All meat from New Zealand is halal. Most of the meats imported from certain regions in the EU are not only halal, but the produce of some sort of barbaric intensive farming as well. The actual keeping, maintaining, welfare and killing of an animal specifically raised for food has become worse, not better, with time. The smaller the world gets, the more bad habits and greed spread, and boy, they are spreading. In every country in the world that boasts a Muslim population, there are huge amounts of halal slaughterhouses, all of which are encouraged by the EU and, it would seem, the actual non-Muslim populations that reside within those areas, who shop and chomp their way through tons of the stuff. Why do you think takeaways, fast food joints, kebab shops and more flourish? Apart from the fact that we let anyone into this country to create new ones and work in existing shops, we, the great British public, the chattering classes and the sheeples all eat this muck. Now whether it's laziness, greed, stupidity, ignorance or blind indifference, I don't know, but facts are facts. These outlets for halal food are increasing at a stupendous rate, and we need laws in this country to curtail it, and we need them quickly. Our armed forces eat halal. Our educational facilities use halal. The government office use halal. Hospitals use halal. Most restaurants, takeaways, cheap food outlets use halal. All the main supermarkets all stock unlabelled halal. I have only seen halal chicken marked as such under the trade name Al-Shabir in Tesco's, which is Jewish owned and also sells kosher. The new move, or rather next year election stunt by Cameron, that he will make it more difficult to come into this country, etc., etc., has been heard before. Poor Michael Howard uttered those immortal words some years ago and has never been heard of since. This move will not help anti-halal protesters because we are already full to the brim with Muslim immigrants anyway, and they've stamped their way of life and living on our lazy and frightened population already. This so-called firming up of immigration laws will not stop the hordes coming over from the EU, or indeed even through Europe from mainland Africa, even if it ever comes into being, which I doubt. Sabre rattling from this coalition, because even they are rather worried that even the liberal man in the street has started to wonder where his way of life has and is going. That is why all the halal protests will not budge any other political party, much like the Muslim grooming scandals which are still going on and the basis of which is still being ignored. Halal has become a nationalist quest. You'll find if you ask any questions or query any crime or report in the UK or indeed Europe that centre around the Islamic way of life or peoples, you will meet a shut door. Every time our party finds something really life-changing and unpleasant that concerns the Muslim communities, it is hushed up, ignored, or there are rants of racist or Nazi echoing around the halls of the abattoirs and kebab shops. Somehow we have to open this door and show the public what's going on, without being called nasty and unjustifiable names. It isn't going to be easy because we have some big guns against us, which is why we need the British people to wake up and realise that they are funding and promoting a foreign way of life and allowing it to flourish in all its gory glory in their own towns, next to their own shops and houses and in their own land. Like a cancer, it must be cut out and destroyed, once and for all. And finally, a triangular flapjacks banned from secondary school over health and safety fears. I really do give up. A school has banned triangular flapjacks on health and safety grounds after a pupil was hit in the eye by one during a lunchtime food fight. Dinner ladies at the comprehensive school were told to cut flapjacks into squares or rectangles only from now on, after the Year 7 boy was sent home complaining of a sore eye. This morning a spokesman for Essex County Council confirmed the ban on triangular treats at Castle View School on Canvey Island. The Castle View School in Essex was deemed the pointy corners of triangular flapjacks a health hazard. The new ruling on flapjacks, which had been served at the school for 15 years, was imposed by head Jill Thomas soon after the incident in the canteen last Wednesday. The boy complained to staff that his eye hurt after he was struck in the eye by the corner of a flying flapjack and was sent home for the afternoon, although his injuries did not merit hospital treatment. The incident was reported to the head and within 24 hours school manager Keith Evans held a meeting for catering staff at the school deemed satisfactory by Ofsted and told them to serve only 4-sided flapjacks in the future. This presenter says, what are we doing to our young boys? They're supposed to be the soldiers of the future and to look after their country. The way they're going they'll all either be in therapy all their lives or waddling around wrapped in cotton wool. Insanity, madness and oatcakes make strange bedfellows. Why not make the sodding cakes round? Then they can be used, like a frisbee, to slice off heads. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night.